Hey, beautiful. So, I had a bit of a Netflix binge yesterday and the day before, which is, it's not a normal thing for me to sit and to watch TV or movies. I might do it occasionally, but most of the time I find myself being really frustrated to kind of sit and to watch something when I know that I want to be investing my energy in creating stuff. But anyway, it was the tail end of Easter celebrations, so doing all the family Easter visits and that sort of stuff, and traveling to Townsville, and I just kind of felt like I wanted to switch off and just not do anything. Yeah. So anyway, I decided to watch, what was it called, Wild Wild Country. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, it is based around, it's an incredible epic tale. It's got lots of twists and turns in it, but it's essentially a documentary that provides insight into, what's the full name? Rajneesh, I can't even remember it, but Osho is what we will know this enigmatic figure to be. Now, what's really interesting is I don't really know too much about Osho's teachings. Like my partner did buy me an Osho book a couple of years ago, but I never read it. I was just never really drawn towards his work. I do remember coming across something many, many years ago, which was with respects to sacred sexuality, and that he totally promoted having a separate room for lovemaking to keep the energy clear and to, really invest in amplifying that sacred spiritual sexual energy. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really beautiful, valid point. But for most people, unfortunately, it's very hard to designate one particular room, particularly if you have a family at home with you. But anyway, it was an interesting thought, and that's probably about the extent that I know of this movement until I watched this freaking crazy documentary, to the point where I was just simply flabbergasted to the extent of the intention, the original intention for creating this, sacred spiritual commune, which was about freedom of expression, freedom of self, sovereignty, liberation from the social constructs that had kept people in slavery or in a conditioned state of appeasing the status quo and perhaps limiting their creativity and limiting their human potential to create more and to create more beauty and abundance in the world. So it was a really deeply fascinating portrayal into human psychology, which I am, as most of you know, I'm quite fascinated about, like trying to understand and piece together why people do what they do, and understanding different personalities and archetypes and things like that. And anyway, so what I wanted to share with respects to how blown away I was at the way that this documentary was pieced together. And I think the biggest takeaway was to really be your own guru, yeah? To not get allured into the mystical perceptions of leaders. It doesn't matter who they are. Like, of course, it's totally healthy to seek inspiration and to gain insight from people's wisdom and teachings. But I think it's really valuable to be able to question everything. Yeah, question what you hear, question who, particular spiritual leaders are. Are they walking their talk? Are they living in alignment with their message? What is the ripple effect from the seeds that they're planting in the energy, and really kind of tracking things back. And I want to share this evening because for a long time, even stepping into this leadership realm myself, knowing what is called of me and what I feel I'm being directed to do, to deliver certain messages as they come through me. but also being a privileged white woman, like having the ability to kind of stand back and watch the scene and watch different movements happening and different subcultures being created. And I find it deeply, deeply fascinating how easy it can be for that role dynamic. So for, in this instance, the master or the guru and the disciple or the student, to have an air of corruption of spirit, corruption of purity, corruption of intention, that it becomes this almost insidious codependent relationship, which slowly over time can take away that sense of agency that people can have over themselves, or their ability to critically think. Yeah? Particularly when groupthink becomes involved, like for instance with this commune where everybody was living, and this vision that had been sold, in a sense, that everybody bought into, but then so much was happening and so much subtle abuse was happening that so many people were afraid to speak up, or maybe they felt that things were a little bit off, but they didn't want to question that. Hi, Amelia. Hey, beautiful. Mwah. Thanks for jumping on this evening. I'm just speaking about some interesting experiences and revelations and takeaways from watching Wild Wild Country, which was a documentary about Osho and the whole Rajneesh community and commune, and yeah, just what an incredibly wild and crazy snapshot of time. And it's interesting, it was like before I was born in 1985, so you know, it was the early 80s, so coming off the free love movement of the 60s, 70s, post-war, and just really, really fascinating. So my point in all of this is, you know, is to always question. And I know, like, I've spoken about self-doubt being healthy, and doubting things being healthy. Like, obviously when everything becomes too much or too little of things, it can create a certain type of discord. But I think with respects to spiritual leaders and teachers, politicians, it doesn't need to be spiritual people, but just anybody that steps into that position of authority, to really have an open mind and to make sure that their actions and the ripple effects that they're connected to line up to what they're speaking and sharing and their message, so that there's a cohesion there and that it's authentic. I guess that's what I'm really trying to map and to speak, because grass seeds in my dress. I have noticed, particularly in the online sphere and the way that online marketing is these days, I totally see a lot of predatory energy, particularly with people posing to be spiritual leaders. And it's something that I noticed quite early on, which kind of made me step back, to be honest. And I've blogged about this before, so if you're familiar with, you know, some of my writing, I've shared this before, and I had some amazing responses come back from that of other people feeling that too. And yeah, I think now more than ever, it's really important to be discerning and to go by your gut feeling as well, to be open-minded, to have the ability to question, to explore, and to seek truth in all things. And this is totally relevant to my journey as well, coming from a psychologically abusive relationship that I didn't know that I was in until I allowed myself to have the lens to see, and then the rose-colored glasses came away. But the interesting part about journeying through that is that, yes, there was incredible pain, but it allowed me to, I guess, become more mature in my perception of the world and to not be so naive. Now, when I was in grade 11, I did modern history, I loved modern history, and I was also doing legal studies as well. And my modern history teacher was my legal studies teacher as well. And she said something which was, it stayed with me. And it was, believe none of what you see and half of what you read. And the interesting part about that, I was actually speaking with a beautiful sister today inside the Womb Temple when we were having this discussion. And that is that even these storytelling, so for instance, this documentary or supposed documentary that I watched, comes from the perspective and the perception of the people that crafted it. So it's never ever a whole truth, it's a perception of the truth. And that goes towards everything that we see online as well. Like, yes, there is elements of truth in it, but there's also crafted aesthetics around that as well. And this is what I kind of gained from this documentary, is that it really brought home to me the importance to be curious, to be open-minded, to not take everything at face value, to trust your body wisdom and the way that things make you feel, and to always be open to the counter argument so that you can form a balanced perspective and opinion on things. Because so many times we're presented information, you know, it doesn't matter where it's in real time or online, and we run with it. You know, like how many times have you seen a fake news post that's been online that you're like, oh my gosh, and you share it without even doing a bit of fact checking. And then all of a sudden these posts go viral and we start to inoculate our culture and belief systems around certain narratives based on this article that somebody's wrote that, you know, then you'll get people later on saying, oh, well, actually that's not truth, and they do the fact checking. And that's what I'm getting to, is to always come back into self, to look within. Guru, as in G-U-R-U. Yeah, G-U-R-U is to come here. The only truth that you can ever know comes from your own individual perspective. We can always be open up to other people's perspectives. They can influence the way that we receive information, the way that we perceive the world, the way that we have the ability to, I guess, open our perception to different worlds. And that's the beautiful part about having a growth mindset as well, or being open to that, is because you'll always be in a state of perpetual curiosity. There is always learning, there is always growth, yeah, that can happen. And it's one thing that I really love to encourage with people that journey with me or in these types of interactions, is to have the ability to think for yourself. And I know in this day and age, particularly with social media and, you know, big movements and the power of groupthink and even culture, that it's not always our friend. Even though everybody else might be doing it, or that, you know, the tribe might be following in this direction, it was always the visionary, yeah, that had the ability to see things beyond the scope of the collective. Yeah, they were the people that were usually cast out as crazy because they went against the status quo and they saw things from a bigger perspective. And that's what I really want to encourage with this message as it comes through, is to always kind of bring your awareness into self, but kind of into that bigger dimensional place, so that you get a broader perspective of what's actually going on, yeah, rather than being so absorbed and consumed in it and having this tunnel vision or having our blinkers into it. Because when we have that ability to look beyond the parameters of our ideology and our belief systems, the whole world of possibility begins to open up to us. It actually stirs our creativity. It helps to connect us with our intuition and our empathy, yeah, because we're not so swept up in the social narrative or the set belief systems, that we have the ability to walk on the fringe, and that's where the magic happens. And that is where all the sages and the wise women and men would be on the fringe. And that was a big reason why these people, these visionaries, these pioneers, these paradigm shifters didn't quite fit in, that they were on the edge, because that way they'd get a broader perspective and be able to absorb more information to formulate a more well-rounded perspective of what's actually going on. And that, to surmise in a very roundabout, eclectic way, is my takeaway from this insane documentary. Like, it was incredibly bizarre. It was just some fantastical tale of the ins and out of humanity and psychology, and I guess how easy it can be for power and control dynamics that are not kept in check to spiral and to create discord, dis-ease, corruption within established communities. And that established communities, you scale down, can be that sense of self as well. So yeah, if you do have Netflix, I encourage you to watch it. I would really love to hear what other people have experienced from going on the wild, wild country journey. Because yeah, it's definitely fascinating, and it's one of those things too that we can take the mystical wisdom teachings and extract the parts that serve the evolution of ourselves and humanity, and learn from the other parts that haven't, so that we can always kind of come back into kindness and purity and creating goodness in the world, and having that ability to look at ourselves clearly. And that includes the shadow work, so that, we don't have to create that kind of extreme dynamic. It's almost like a schism of the mind playing out on the screen. It's incredibly crazy. So it's getting a little bit rambly there. So if you have seen it, I would welcome some discussion. I would love to know what your takeaways were from it, or what you extracted, what wisdom you gathered from experiencing the story and the magic of the storytelling as well. And that was the conversation that I was having with my beautiful sister today, was about the power of storytelling. And then it kind of bridged on to the incredible tale that I just witnessed play out over, I think it was like 6 or 7 hours. Like, it's just wild. So anyway, I hope that message was coherent, and it speaks an air of truth for you to really be discerning with what you absorb and what you allow yourself to, I guess, take on as truth, and to really make sure that you're coming back into your true north, not the magnetic north. And I've spoken about that before, but that's, that kind of bridges on the crux of the teaching with respects to, I guess, particularly with the guru archetype, or the masters, and those, wild spiritual leaders that, do have, which was mentioned in the video, that cult-like energy around it. That, yeah, it's incredibly alluring and mystical and romantic, and it speaks to the fundamental need to be seen, to be valued, to be contributing, and feel like you belong to something as well. And I think that that's why these environments can be prolific in that sense, because they speak to that core need of humanity. It speaks to the heart to belong. Yeah. Anyway, I'm wrapping this up. So much love and many blessings to you. I hope you've had a beautiful equinox energy and a blue moon. The blue moon was in Virgo, so it was a really powerful time to be, really bloody mozzies, planting some powerful rootstocks for some big dreaming this year, as all full moons are. So yeah, we'll look forward to checking in with you soon.